truth is indeed stranger, sometimes funnier than fiction. The excerpt you just read is part of a description of Isabelo de los Reyes by Resil Mojares. De los Reyes is considered the first Filipinologist and the father of Philippine socialism, the Philippine labor movement, and Philippine folklore studies. He was the country's most unorthodox intellectual, Mojares informs us. But most Filipinos have not heard of him, much less read about him. He is one of the three Filipino intellectuals Mojares introduces to us in his book, Brains of the Nation. The other two are Pedro Paterno and Trinidad Hermenegildo Pardo de Tavera. Many of Mojares' chosen topics of study are those that have been largely ignored by other scholars.
In many ways, figures like Paterno kind of neglected in terms of studies done about them. And part of the reason, I think, it's political correctness in the sense that we have a tendency to write books about Bonifacio, about Rizal, but Paterno, with his reputation as the person who collaborated with the Americans, that it's not kind of politically correct to write a book about him, which I think is a problem in scholarship. Writing a book about him is not necessarily glorifying the person. We need to appreciate history in all its aspects. I mean, there's as much to be learned from knowing people who either failed or took the wrong political position. There's much to be learned from the stories of these people as from the stories of conventional kind of heroes.
When one reads Resil Mojares, one must be prepared to be surprised, for he is wont to say something new or unexpected. Writing about the disagreement between Jose Rizal and Isabelo de los Reyes, he says, decorating his polemic with praise for the enemy and displays of false modesty, Rizal reveals a mean, supercilious streak. Dropping phrases in Italian as he cites Pigafetta, Rizal claims for himself a superior understanding not only of wider range of sources, but knowledge of these sources in the original or in a form close to it. In support of this, Mojares includes a quote from Rizal. On the subject of the history of civilization of the ancient Filipinos, I think I have read from cover to cover all the works of contemporary writers, except that of Father Plasencia and that of another author which had been lost. Never have I stated anything on my own authority. I quote sources, and when I do, I have them before me. That gives us a glimpse of our national hero, who we now realize is an intellectual not much unlike some present-day intellectuals. When Mojares reveals to us the not-so-heroic side of Rizal and our other heroes, it is not to denigrate them, but to render them human without the least bit diminishing their greatness. Mojares does not, for a single moment, make us forget the significance of these important people in our past. Mojares is what some call a literary historian, one who writes history with the imagination and creativity of a novelist or poet. His characters are three-dimensional and his prose impeccable. His first love is creative writing, he says, but martial law caused him to stop writing fiction, and he became an academic at the University of San Carlos. Resil Mojares is Professor Emeritus of San Carlos University and was the founding director of the Cebuano Studies Center since its founding in 1975 until 1996. When he assumed the directorship of San Carlos Publications, he taught and inspired many scholars from the university.
One thing that I learned from him is to focus on the local. We said, well, so many things have been done, research and studied papers here and there, publications on Manila and on the national, but even the national is not too rich.
But I think the greatest help he had for me was, by example, of course, his research, his thoroughness, his rigor, discipline, all that I learned from him. One of the two things that I really learned from him is, number one, interdisciplinarity. So you can't look at literature alone and as an independent thing, autonomous thing.
Mojares has written many books on various topics, the Philippine novel, theater, and other aspects of culture.
I don't really have the patience to get stuck in just one subject. And part of the reason is, again, as I told a friend, I'm basically a learner. I enjoy learning. And so I take writing, research as a mode of learning. So that's why in the recent book, Isabelo's Archive, because of the design of the book itself, I have to write on as many different topics as possible. So underlying writing and doing research work, I think it's the joy of learning that kind of fuels that, because I always feel that if you want to get to know a particular subject, the best way of doing it is to write about it.
The range of Mojares' scholarship, his erudition, is on full display in his books, especially in his most recent works.
Now, there's lots of us who are thinking for the country. I mean, you can name dozens and dozens of Filipino intellectuals, but really none of them have done both archival and empirical research. I mean, we just kind of think we must be right because we're logical, we're bright, but to actually go and find out what do people actually say, what's really happening on the ground, he's the only one who really has the patience and the persistence and the energy to do that, and he's done it really all his life. So he is, I think, the model for Filipino intellectuals, especially those who are still young and want to know what it means to be an intellectual in the Philippines. He's the guy. That, I think, is his contribution. I think it was Santayana who said that if you don't remember the past, you are bound to repeat it. Well, I think that's only half the truth. The full truth is, if you don't interpret the past to help you in the present, you won't have a future. And what Resil Mojares has done is to give us a future. And this is what Filipinos need sorely, is to realize that we have a future based on our past.